beating each other up. It's open. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, warmly welcome all participants for that panel and all our panelists. We have here Mr. Yacov Livne, which is the Ambassador of Israel in Poland. We also warmly welcome Bartłomiej Pawlak, which is a board member of Polski Fundusz Rozwoju. Also, we have here Elroy Knebel, the president of the Polish-Israeli Chamber of Commerce. On the line, we will have Yossi Halevy, which is the vice president of Millennium Fund, which is a fund specialized in food tech business. And also Mr. Klein, which is the vice president of the ASHRA company, which is working on trading insurance. So welcome again. Welcome, gentlemen online.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, we hear you. Okay, good. Thank you so much. So let me make some introduction, and then of course we will go through this subject. First of all, a couple of facts which should be the opening for that session. First one is very important and emotional, which means that Poland and Israel, our nations like Poles and Jews, we have over 1,000 mutual history, which is something really great, astonishing, and respectable. On another hand, in those days, we are feeling that there is a certain gap between, business between those countries. It's like totally big gap instead of, doing a beautiful business between such a history countries. And the third of all, there is some kind of political disturbances, which we also can see last days. But what we feel when we were discussing this issue among the people who are involved in this business between the countries, we believe that the base should be warming up, intensifying the business relations, investment, etc., etc. So my opening questions, please feel free to open that, is what in your opinion, is a very general opening question, could be done, in what areas maybe would you specify to warm up those relations, to bring up more mutual projects, mutual involvement. And maybe Mr. Ambassador, would you like to start?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here tonight. Indeed, I think that Israel and Poland, the Jewish people and the Polish people have a lot in common. We have, as you have just said, 1,000 years of common history. We believe that this should be a solid base, not only for looking at the past, which is important. We need to understand the past, we need to learn the past, but we should also use our common history, we should use our common heritage in order to build better relationships for these generations and have better relationships looking forward. Now, this is something that we still need to work on. I have been here in Warsaw for almost 4 months now. We will be very happy to see a Polish ambassador back in Israel. We believe this is very important to return to the usual standard way of having diplomatic relationship between such friendly countries as Poland and Israel. So I hope very much that this will happen soon. We hope that this will happen soon. And I would like to say even more than that. I came here in order to bring our relationship, to put them back on track, to put them back to the normal, good situation where we have been before. I believe this is what we should do. And I have to say that in the period since my arrival, I have many chances to speak with Polish counterparts, with Polish friends here in Warsaw. And I think there is a mutual will really to have good relationship between Jerusalem and Warsaw. We need to work on this. Once again, I would like to reiterate, it's important that we will have back an ambassador of Poland in Israel. We hope it will happen. He will be most welcomed in Israel, as I am feeling very welcomed here in Poland. I think this is one of the things that will really assist us to move forward.
Thank you. Elroy, you are in the middle, not because middle and the gentleman, but you're in the middle between these countries, and you know, you're really a great example how it can work. If you can comment open, you know.
First of all, thank you. And it's true, I'm in the middle. Also, I have dual citizenship, so I'm an Israeli citizen. I reside in Israel, but I have dual citizenship. I do believe that my personal feeling is that if we will have stronger business relationship and there will be more economic transactions and more business going on between businessmen between the two countries, it will strengthen the ties even at the political level. Why? Because when people have something to lose, they less tend to quarrel. They less have to. It's more complicated to shake the boat, let's say, okay? Or you don't want to shake it too widely. And I think we should work on this. And I think we should use the two competitive advantages that each country has. So Poland is a big economy, first of all. It's a strong economy. Okay, inflation, but inflation we have everywhere in the world today. It has a very good manpower. And it has a lot of EU money available in Poland for investments, which is also a big benefit of Poland. And I think Israel, on the other hand, is a startup nation, you know, so we are famous on not only have a good ideas, but also how to commercialize them, how to use the money given for startups in order to reach the stage when a startup becomes a real company, a bigger company, and traded later on stock exchanges around the world. And I think we can combine these two issues. And I can tell you from my personal experience and what we know as the chamber and from my business experience that there are Israeli startups today coming to Poland, choosing to do their projects in Poland, on the one hand benefiting from grants offered by Poland using EU resources dedicated for this purpose. On the other hand, using very skilled Polish HR. And then at the end of the day, the company is still an Israeli company, you know, by ownership. But business is done partly here and partly in Israel. I think it's a good example of, otherwise these startups, for example, if they cannot get funding in Israel, they would die. Okay? The company will be suffocated. On the other hand, also Poland has a very good, let's say, laboratory services. There is a state-of-the-art laboratories in Poland. There are very skilled professionals working, PhDs and laborants working these laboratories. And Israelis are coming to Poland in order to do experiments because it's less expensive than in Israel. But still, you know, it's beneficial for both parties. I think that you make an advancement in these two countries together. I would say also that we have concrete examples. You know, I can give you names of companies that did it. Some of them traded on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, like Albad, like Aquarius, like other companies in areas of agriculture, IT, drones, and etc. So I think this could be a thing. Another issue is the Polish-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, which we both share the management of that. We signed, for example, 2 days ago, a cooperation agreement with the Marshal from Lublin. So I have to say that the initiative came from the Marshal of Lublin, and the intention is to implement via this letter of intent projects, again, that would benefit both Israeli companies and bring here the knowledge, actually sell it to Poland. On the other hand, implement it in Poland with the assistance of this EU fund. So again, it's something that shows, I think, a very good potential. And that's my belief. We should push for more business between the countries.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, gentlemen, you make my life easy because the next question is greatly connected to what you said, Roy, that there is a needed a kind of a platform, kind of a mutual cooperation atmosphere, and what we faced in the Lublin was exactly what everybody would expect. So next I will ask Bartek, I will ask you, because you represent the institution which nominally is designed and dedicated for supporting this kind of a project and cooperation. So I would ask two questions in a one, but least your answer will be very, very important, is, first of all, in which sectors you, as a very experienced manager, you see this cooperation can be the most valuable, first of all, and the second of all, how PFR is approaching to that. What kind of a tools PFR is preparing and offering, for instance, in kind of an international cooperation?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation and have a chance to speak among such a distinguished guests as you, Mr. Ambassador, and Elroy, who spent in Poland so much time and developed the economic relations between Poland and Israel in such an effective way for decades. I must say that I see couple of platforms of cooperation and needs from the perspective of Poland, because as Elroy mentioned, this is quite an interesting market. I mean, Poland is a big country with enormous needs and expectations, and one of them is, for example, this startup ecosystem. So as Elroy mentioned, Israel is a kind of now is treated as a startup nation, and this is the synonym of this country. And for us, this is still like a big challenge to create a greater ability of young people to be young entrepreneurs. We still, if you look at the young people, if you look at the number of startups, we are still low in a, let's say, long line of the countries that are much more developed in this hierarchy than Poland. Even small countries like Estonia is much more developed. So there is a huge space for developing new innovative businesses, and we need knowledge, because we have very skillful researchers, we have very skillful students and alumni that leave the universities. So we have a very high quality young people. However, without this kind of feeling that if I finish the university and graduate from the university, I have to start my own business. While in Israel, it's getting more and more kind of like a lifestyle. And what is also a kind of important for us is the approach to these new businesses. When I was in Israel, I learned a lot about this word chutzpah, and this kind of distance you keep towards even kind of failures. So if the first business you failed, don't worry, you can start another one. In Poland, it's a kind of, I would say, kind of tragedy for the owners.
It's a shame.
Yes. So we can learn from our Israeli partners this kind of mental approach. On the other hand, this is much more professional approach towards new businesses. I mean, this ecosystem of venture capitals. So we need more relations and more kind of import of this know-how. That's why when we create this, because PFR is divided into two pieces, our direct big investments that we invest directly, and investments into startups that is based on the fund of funds approach. And for these startups, we always look for venture capitals that we provide with a part of the equity, part of the commitment. And this is always an open competition, not only for the Polish VCs, but from the VCs from the different countries, also from Israel. And especially now when we started another fund of fund program, it is called Green Hub Fund of Funds. So the program that is dedicated to the VCs that would like to participate in a green transformation. This is, I think, very interesting for them, also for the VCs from Israel, because Israel is much more developed as far as, for example, this green or developed agriculture is concerned. There are already several implementations in Israel that are still kind of a matter of research in Poland. So that's why, for example, we think about trip to Israel to look for this most interesting examples of the implementations of different solutions that could be also implemented in Poland.
Right.
So, yeah. So I think startups, ecosystems, young entrepreneurs, this is something that we really need, and we can strengthen our relations based on it, and Polish Development Fund is ready to support it.
Let me thank you very much. I mean, that was very intensive, I would like to say, because one short comment, and then we will move exactly to the VC representative, to Yossi. The main idea which you mentioned, I don't want anyone from the audience to lose that, is that really what is said all over the world, or how we perceive Israel, this ecosystem for the economy, is like a startup nation. And even there is a book explaining how it happened that the biggest number of the Israeli companies, the biggest number of the NASDAQ companies are based originally from the Israel, because of the certain system, how it's done, how it's managed, how it's properly commercialized, etc. And what you said, Bartek, is also very interesting, because when we are meeting Israeli friends and partners, they say, you're kind of an innovation nation. Meaning in Poland, that the number of the innovations our young people, our scientists are doing is extremely high comparing to other countries, and then there is the gap, so we can probably use that together. So, but again, you mentioned a very important issue, which is the money, which is a founding, a way to found, a way to manage. So I would like to move now to Yossi Halevy. Yossi, if you can comment, you are an investor, you're representing investment fund. How would you approach to that? And for instance, is there any from kind of a partner like PFR you would welcome, you would need? In what conditions Poland, for you as an investor, can be a really competitive country?
So first of all, thank you for having us here. I think it's a great initiative, talking about the Israeli startup nation. And from my perspective as a food tech investor, where I see, before that, I think the ambassador was talking about diplomacy, and diplomacy sometimes opens up new opportunities. And I think that Poland is in the right position. I think that without elaborating any longer about the Ukrainian war, I think that there's a door opening for the Polish market to capture some of the miss-outs that are resulted from the Ukraine war. And I think that Israel, as Eloy said, we are a tech transfer company. We are not a market to export from goods. We are a market to export from software, technologies, everything that is not tangible, everything that is knowledge, know-how. And I fully agree that business build relationships, because basically it's a cultural thing. Even being an entrepreneur in Israel, it's a cultural thing. We, as the guys here said before, we have a chutzpah. We call it, we fail forward. Entrepreneurs in Israel fail forward. And with every mistake they do, they learn a lot, and they still have the courage to take it to the next level. So referring to the initiatives in Poland, I think that it needs to be more, I think, on the communication level. I think that many Israelis, VCs, we have a lot of opportunities here to invest in Israel, and tie companies from the Israeli market to the Polish market with all the HR benefits that Poland can offer, and the entire technology that Israel can export. And we just need to see how entrepreneurs see that appealing in a way that, as Eloy said before, we are trying and sometimes success to do this kind of connections, and it's growing. And as a fund, I think that the opportunity to have a base of investors which is governmental, with the clear idea of green, for example, for the Green Fund. I think it's an amazing initiative. Any fund that has some kind of an impact, either if it's social or environmental or economic impact, should explore. And it's just about communication and just enhancing the benefits towards the Israeli VCs.
Thank you. As you can see, there are some general words which we are using, like opportunities, business, conditions, contacts, nations. They are very, very general. So maybe let me come back to you, Mr. Ambassador, and what do you think? I mean, you are new in that environment, but probably even during these 4 months you learned quite a lot. What do you think? What is the biggest challenges? What do you think? How do you see the biggest challenges, I mean, on your very top level, which we have to manage to try to make our relation on a business, which is a very organic, more dynamic, more intensive?
Thank you. I think indeed that the biggest challenge on the level of both government and business is dialogue.
Right.
This is, by the way, not only a challenge, obviously, for Israel and Poland. I think this is a challenge for every 2 countries, for every 2 systems. In our case of Poland and Israel, I think we have a very good basis to develop such a dialogue, because on some basic level, we really have a good understanding, I believe, an understanding regarding the needs and the interests of the other side. I think we could just now hear from both from the Israeli side and from the Polish side about the strength, about the abilities of our societies, the strength and the abilities of our economies, which to a large extent, I would say, can fulfill the gaps that we have in Israel or in Poland. And we need to work on this. We need to find the relevant niches. We need to find the relevant places where we can be useful, where Israeli firms can work in Poland and vice versa. I think from what I am told here, from what I have heard, there is really a large potential for the continuation of this work, because we have been speaking about the development, you said yourself, the development of such relationship, but we are not starting from zero. We have the colleagues here. I am new to Polish-Israeli relationship, but business people from both countries and governments, both in Jerusalem and in Warsaw, have been working now for more than 3 decades on building this relationship. So we have a good basis. We have a good understanding. I think we could have even a better understanding in order to achieve our goals, and I believe these goals are common. We have common interests. We need to achieve them together. I strongly believe in this.
All right, I would like to...
Yeah, I wanted to make one comment. We are talking about innovation, etc. We will not forget I'm representing the Polish-Israeli Chamber of Commerce, and it says commerce also. We are trying to change the name now, commerce and innovation, but we are not there. But commerce, there is also a balance, and maybe Dudi or David, what should I use?
Dudi is good.
Dudi is good.
Yeah.
So I think that also, countries are always checking at the end of the year or any budgetary year, they're checking what is the balance, what was the import, export between the 2 countries, etc. And each country wants to attract more export for itself and investment, which is okay. It stimulates the business at the end of the day. Maybe, Dudi, you will give us your view, if you can, just what can be done, for example, from an organization like yours to increase the volume of trade between the countries or investment.
Thank you for the question. I would like to state that ASHRA is the Israeli Export Credit Agency, and our goal is to promote Israeli export, and we are doing it by giving the Israeli export an alternative opportunity to give the buyer attractive financing package. So I can say that ASHRA this year is going to support over $700 million transaction, and mainly in the sector of healthcare, education, infrastructure, water treatment, and defense. I think in this sector, and maybe in other growing sectors like green energy, solar power, and maybe cyber, we can try to promote cooperation and trade between Israel and Poland. As ASHRA, as an institution, we are cooperating with other ECA. And you know that the Polish ECA is cookie, and we are already changing drafts into getting into cooperation agreement that maybe will enable us to create a multi-source transaction maybe in a third country. We are aiming to countries in Africa, and to do it by a way of reinsurance, co-insurance. That means that we will support the Israeli exporter, and the cookie will support the Polish exports. I can state that we have good examples from other countries, like, for example, Italy, when we reached cooperation with SACE, and we already done a transaction in Ghana, in Suriname, Ivory Coast, in Belarus, together with Israeli exporters and with Italian exporters. And I think the last example, which is a good example of this agreement that can promote trade and cooperation between the two countries, is like the last Abraham agreement in United Emirates, which was signed in 2020. After that, ASHRA signed this cooperation agreement with ECI, which is the Emirates ECA. And this week, we concluded a transaction of 140 million euros that half of it will be supported from ASHRA to Israeli exporters, and the other half will be supported by ECI, which is the Israeli Emirates.
That's a very interesting thing.
If we do it, yes. So I think once we do the first transaction together, it will give a boost, because there is a phenomenon of the Israeli jumbo. Once you do a good transaction, a successful transaction, then you can see a lot of followers among the Israeli exporters, and hopefully from the Polish exporters, that will increase cooperation and trade between the countries.
I wanted to comment that it's a very interesting thing. The countries don't have to cooperate only with each other. They can cooperate in investing or doing business in third countries, which is the most beautiful way of cooperation. This is exactly what you were talking about. I think it's a wonderful way that we should pursue.
That's also what I believe Yossi mentioned, that single country for certain reason is either too small, either unable to do something in a certain areas. And again, what you said, Mr. Ambassador, I wrote down, I'm just writing your words, as a dialogue and a common. What exactly I believe, you prove that you started already this common dialogue with the cookie for the mutual businesses, yes. Meaning that normally the Polish companies, for them, the markets which are available for Israeli companies are not available. But because of the three parties mutual agreement, we three parties can do much better. That's, I believe, how the world looks right now. And
excuse me,
would you like to comment
that? If I can add something, because we already got an offer from one of the Israeli investor that is active in renewables, that maybe we could make a common business in the third countries in Europe. So this is one of these examples. So apart from doing business in Poland, we can think about the other European countries. But I would like to emphasize also another factor. Of course, we have this tragic situation in Ukraine. However, this creates also, I don't want to use the word opportunities, but the new reality that we, from the business perspective, should also take into account. First of all, the crisis in Belarus created a flow of 20,000 highly qualified young people, mostly from the IT sector from Belarus in Poland. So we have this new group that try to establish a new life, new businesses, but this is also new potential. Another group, of course, and the much, let's say, complex situation is the situation with Ukraine. On one hand, we have the flow of businesses now that are escaping the war, and we have to help them to establish mostly here in Poland, because this is the country that is the closest to Ukraine and is the most stable, the most welcoming also, because this is that's the fact, yes, that we are hosting now 1.5 million Ukrainian, mostly women and children. Even at my home, we have now I have a woman, but before I had a family. So I'm really close to this. However, this is a kind of maybe a common challenge, how to help these companies to re-establish in a new place, how to help them to create new markets, to reorient at the new markets, new countries in their activities, how to survive this difficult time, and at the end, and I hope this war will come to its end at a certain moment, how to participate together in reconstruction of Ukraine, because it will be a huge challenge, and we are again we have a very strategic position in this process. However, I think this is an open kind of possibility for any other country, so also for Israel, and maybe we can think about what we can do together to reconstruct Ukraine, because it will be a huge process probably that will take decades.
And this is a very interesting point which you mentioned, because already it was mentioned that two countries with a much smaller potential than Israel, much smaller potential than Poland, and definitely much smaller than our mutual potential, which is Belgium and Holland, they already agreed with the Ukrainian government on the sector which they will be reconstructing. So definitely, you know, from the very pragmatic time, oh, thank you so much. So this is I would say from the very pragmatic point of view, not cruel point of view, this is the high time we should maybe bound the forces and try to do something together. You mentioned about the examples, and I know that some examples could be presented by Elroy, by you. You know, some examples how it works in a reality, in a practice, that Israeli company get something from the market, from the funds, from the environment in Poland, and is very happy. If you can give an example or explain how it works in a practice.
In the practice, an Israeli startup that see Poland as an interesting market, Poland has a wonderful offer for it, because Poland is offering up to 80% grant, very close to 80% grant from a agreed budget, for a project to be implemented in Poland. And Polish government does not ask for any grip on the IP of the company. It means that the IP still belongs to the Israeli company in Israel. Okay, right. It can be commercialized later on from Israel or from Poland. That's a decision of the Israeli company. But the project has to be implemented in Poland, which means that Polish economy benefits from HR, from laboratories, etc., that this money needs to buy on the soil of Poland. So it works for both parties. It's a wonderful, wonderful cooperation, I think, and it's working very nicely. And it's attractive for Israel, it's attractive for Poland. I think that Polish policy not to ask for any grip on the IP, and on the other hand, ask to implement the project, created in the last decade an ecosystem of innovation in Poland. Maybe not as developed as in Israel, but it exists. There are hundreds of thousands of IT developers, of laborants working in laboratories, because there is a demand from startups that are working here and need to spend the money on these issues. And this is stimulating the economy, actually. Right. And what PFR has to offer, for example, that they are co-investing in venture capital funds as a government, as a government institution, as a government agency together, in order to reinvest in companies, can be the same way. Israeli companies opening a Polish subsidiary and again and again. So it's working very nicely. Super. Examples I gave. So there are a couple of companies in there. Maybe some of them don't want to be mentioned by name, but it's worked wonderfully.
That's very practical and very optimistic. 5 minutes left of our meeting, so I would like to give a round for a closing note. Mr. Ambassador. You know, one sentence, one most important sentence.
2 sentences with your
That's
permission.
All right. Fair enough.
Ukraine was mentioned. I think we need to understand that things are changing in our world. There are new challenges, but also new opportunities. Therefore, friendly countries such as Israel and Poland should work together more than we did in the past. This is important. Second, I think this is also the time to invest in the future. Investing in the future means investing in our young generation, both in Israel and in Poland. We need to work more on that. We need to have more encounters, more meetings between young people from Israel and from Poland. This will also help to bring closer our nations and to make our ability to have business together more robust for the long run. This is also important.
Thank you. Yossi, note from you.
I'm very related to what the ambassador has to say. I think that, as I said before, I think that relationships are the most important thing. So more delegation at younger age, more educational, trips and visits in both countries to see what can be benefited from each other. Because I think that, I have some Polish friends, and it's not enough. It's not enough businesses that we're doing together. It's not enough efforts that we're doing. We need to do more. I think Elroy is doing it greatly, but it's still, to convince, Israeli company or a Polish company to work together, it's not trivial. And I think that it's something that we can bridge through meetings and delegations.
Thank you. Bartek, final note.
We live in a very difficult moment of history, but I think from the perspective of our nations, Israelis got accustomed to live in a very difficult situation. So you are very flexible, you know how to behave, you can improvise, you know how to protect yourself in the difficulties and how to develop business in a very unfriendly environment. While Poles and Poland is going through the transition of the system through the last 30 years. So the Franz Timmermans, the deputy president of the European Commission, usually says that we are the masters of transition. So because we know how to adjust to a new situation, we are also very flexible, very open for new solutions, and we know how to react fast and also how to improvise. So to some extent, we are a lot in common. So I believe even in a difficult time, we can create kind of new opening in our relations. And I strongly believe in this new opening, and I strongly believe in what Mr. Ambassador said, that relations and once more, relations are most important. This is the basis of our good cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Dudi, how would you add to that?
Well, from ASHRA perspective, our main goal is to conclude the agreement with Cook in the next month, in the next forthcoming months, and this I hope will enable us to do the first transaction, the first multi-source transaction in 2023. And from our perspective, I think it will be a success and a beginning of a very fruitful relationship.
Thank you. And the last question, which is the toughest, Elroy, is to you. This is like a future teller. How would you see, how would you feel next 10 years of the Polish-Israeli business, commercial cooperation?
I cannot sum up what will be in the future, but I can tell you, first of all, regarding Dudi, we promise as a PICC to help you try to conclude this agreement with Kuken, with the help maybe of the embassy. We will try to make it happen, okay? This will be our goal in the next couple of months, one of our goals. Second, I wanted to say just generally, not to take up, because I think we used up our time, that when there is a will, there is a way. And I'm sure that there is, as Ambassador said, that if there is a relation, so it's like location. There is a will, we will find a way. We as the PICC will contribute to make the knowledge more available in both countries of what are the opportunities in the other countries, facilitate the ability of business people to meet and generate business. We generate common interest, we generate stability. This is my future, the future as I see it.
Thank you so much. Thank you all participants. Thank you our colleagues in Israel, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you so much, Bartek. Thanks, Elroy. Thanks for organizing all these things and inviting us here. Thanks all participants. Thanks.
Thank you.